Hello and welcome to the weekly vmcampos Comic Book Club. I'm your host, vmcampos. This is the podcast where I answer, what am I reading this week? This week I've got Ghost Tree #1 from IDW. The creative team is writer Bobby Curnow, art Simon Gain, colors by Ian Herring with Becca Kinsey, letters Chris Mowry, and consultant Takuma Okada. I think this synopsis works best. An ancestral home, a haunted tree, a touching story of love, loss, and healing wounds from creator Bobby Curnow and Simon Gain. The story starts off with a little boy and his grandfather somewhere in rural Japan. The little boy is having fun, pretending. The grandfather sees something in the woods. Both he and the child, Brant, go a little bit deeper into the woods where some interesting creatures lurking about. Grandfather makes Brant promise 2 things. The first, promise me that you will cherish your childhood. Those will be your longest memories, Brant. The other promise, I want you to meet me here under this tree 10 years after I die. That begins this story, Ghost Tree, about past obligations, about the memories that we hold and that we lose, about the contrast of our childhoods with our grown-up lives. Brant grows up and does fulfill the promise to come back 10 years after Oji-chan's death, his grandfather's death. Oba-san, or the grandmother, still lives, still is as stubborn as ever, and is still quite old-fashioned. She doesn't approve of Brant coming to visit the old country without his wife. It seems like there is some form of strain in Brant's marriage. He's uneasy most of the time when that subject comes up. But he becomes more peaceful in the rural Japanese countryside. There's more to the idyllic nature there, however, than meets the eye. The story is very intriguing. There's a realism to it, family dynamics and all, plus a fantastical element that is hinted upon in the beginning of the book and then becomes quite apparent halfway through. The dialogue is realistic and the characters feel real as well. Young Brant really is a little kid. Older Brant does have the weight of adulthood on his shoulders quite plainly. His grandfather in the past is quite wise, and grandmother in the present is firm but fair. The art is really nice. It's very detailed, literally very detailed. There are beautiful panoramas of the countryside where you can almost count the blades of grass that the artist renders. The slats of the wooden house are all crafted very well with great shadows and detail. Shading is very subdued. It's subtle gradients with a bit of cell shading with harder edges, but not very hard, very subtle color shifts. And characters inside of the woods, under the canopy of leaves, show the light and shadow coming through those leaves. There's a scene at an airport, which is quite crowded and detailed, just like the scenes in the countryside. There's a loving close-up of a bowl of ramen with mushrooms and steam wafting from it, looking very tasty. A supporting character is Mariko, Brant's cousin, along with her child. If you look for the child in the background of many panels, he's expressively drawn, really cute, capricious, especially at the dinner table. The author does a lot of great detail, is what I'm getting at. There's an evening scene with Brant smoking in the back porch very pensively. The various plants in pots look wonderful, and then the encroaching darkness in the woods has a bit of ominous nature to it. There's a very odd night scene that you'll have to experience yourself when you read this book. Expressions of the characters are great. You can really get a sense of pensiveness, stubbornness, wistfulness, melancholy, and surprise. And the book ends with a very intriguing Yes, you were right. I know that silly boy. Who says it and why? Well, I won't reveal what I don't know. There's a house ad for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 93. The countdown to issue 100 begins with the most explosive storyline in TMNT history. Now, back in my day, the Ninja Turtles were at Mirage Studios. But doing a little bit of research, apparently they were bought by Viacom in 2009, and the Turtles have been published by IDW for a little while now, 93 issues. Another change from back in my day is that Usagi Yojimbo is coming to IDW. Usagi was first published over in Albedo, independently by Thoughts and Images, then went on to Fantagraphics, then Mirage, Dark Horse. IDW is its latest home. And lastly, a house ad for Star Trek Year 5. As their mission ends, their greatest test begins. The standout name there is that covers by Greg Hildebrandt, one half of the classic fantasy illustrator duo. So in all, Ghost Tree was enjoyable. It had these great hints of rural Japan, thanks to the consultant, Takuma Okada. The art was detailed, color palette subdued but realistic, and the characters were also pretty realistic in a fantastical setting. I recommend the book. So this week I read Ghost Tree number 1 from IDW. And this has been the weekly VM Campos Comic Book Club. I'll see you next week.